Thank you. Okay, so I'm here to talk about something you've heard a little bit about throughout the day and perhaps throughout the previous months. It's progressive web apps, but specifically in a kind of e-commerce setting, I want to talk about these being profitable and hopefully how we can go about showing that as well. Now, a little intro beforehand, and I thought to try and get you in the right mindset, what I do is write this as a user story. So this is a little bit about me, and also I've promised that I'm going to stay within this square here. So you might see me resisting the urge to run over and touch the slides, but I'm going to stay here. So I'm a developer advocate over at Google. What that means is that I'm interested in how we can improve the web as a platform for developers. So really, the entire point of Meet Magento for me is to meet you, and for you to meet me, tell me what you need from the platform, what works for you, what doesn't work for you, what kind of stuff you know about what we do, and what you're interested in. Number of ways you can contact me, find me on Twitter or GitHub, and where are my Google Plus users? You can't see this on the video, but everyone put their hands up. Okay. So what I'm really interested in is, I really want to make the web the best platform for developers and for users. So before I go in, slight warning, I'm going to do that whole define the term upfront thing. So, but hopefully in a slightly different way from what you've seen before. First of all, I want you to think about PWAs as a user. And in this sense, it's like this. As a user, it's letting you raise your expectations for what's possible from the web. This really means that we're moving beyond the idea of, I click a link and I wait for it to load, and we're actually talking about a much more fully featured app platform rather than just this collection of linked documents. Now, then, on the other side of this, as developers, PWA is allowing us to quantifiably define that experience. So this is what takes PWA beyond just being the next buzzword after Web 2.0, because no one really knew what that meant beyond maybe some rounded corners, Ajax, and charging 10 times as much for consultancy. But PWA means we actually have a checklist. We have a defined list of things that we can say, this is a PWA or it isn't, and we can explicitly state what's involved in that. And so, there's the checklist. You can find that on developers.google.com/web. If you remember one bit of this, it's just that /web bit. We have linked everything under there. And what I really wanted to say is, who was in Shane's talk earlier? Oh, okay, 50-50 maybe. Oh, okay, so Shane went through Lighthouse as a tool, and what I really want to reinforce here is that we are trying to ensure that Lighthouse is the single source of truth when it comes to what are Google's measurements about speed, about SEO, about whether something is a progressive web app. So what I really want you to take away from this slide is you should be using Lighthouse as part of your development toolchain. It's already there in Chrome, in the developer tools. If you go to the audit panel, you can run a Lighthouse audit, so you don't need to install it. And what I would highlight on this slide is you maybe can't see it super well, but you notice how the Lighthouse is overlapping use there? You see the light is that is what we in the advertising biz call a subliminal message. So this is really what I'm telling you here is use Lighthouse, okay? Right. You can find more about that there, /web tools Lighthouse. Okay. Oh, and as a bonus, Shane was also showing you the tool for the sort of compare my site. That is actually backed off of the Chrome user experience data. So throughout the talk, because I'm terrible with timekeeping and tried to cram too much content into this, I've basically included these little special offers. These are conversation starters that you can use to come talk to me in the bar afterwards. Okay, so a TLDR of that. What am I really talking about here? What's different about progressive web apps? Or what's the thing that we're really trying to get across? The answer is it's just this. This is the TLDR. Progressive web apps are just the web done right. It's just this incremental version, the platform improving, and the best practices that we want to try and apply on top of that. But that does come with a few problems. Specifically, why does everyone keep getting it so wrong? Like we saw the default Magento theme out of the box and the performance that comes on that. And the thing is, that's not dunking on Magento, that's the state of the web in general, right? And pages are continuing to get heavier and get slower, even as people's connections improve. This is what we're trying to make happen whenever we get into software development. We have money in over here and money out over there. I like e-commerce because it's explicitly kind of honest in this approach, right? We're not pretending that we're kind of improving the universe as the whole. We're here to indulge in pure capitalism, right? You put money in and you get money out the other side. The problem with this image in software development is no one ever really knows how big that side is. And more often than not, it does not work out this way. But I want to give you a little history lesson here, just to kind of put it in context, so I'm not giving you all bad news. This is really just the traditional computer science approach. Thank you. And so to do that, I'm going to go back to 1821. So this is Charles Babbage, who was kind of one of the, the forefathers of modern computing. And he begins designing the difference engine in 1821. 1830, he completes the design and begins production. 1832, Babbage apparently, surprisingly for a software engineer, had quite a prickly personality, so got into a dispute with the engineer building this. He walked off the project. And then 1842, government withdraws funding for that, undeterred by this. 1847, he starts the design for different engine number 2. 1849, he finishes the design for difference engine number 2. 1871, Charles Babbage dies. 1985, the Science Museum in London begins construction of the next difference engine with the plan that they're going to have this done for the 200th centenary of his birth. That rolls around 1991, and they have completed the calculating section of the machine. So they can calculate problems, but they can't display results with it yet. There's just a kind of assurance that that's right. So then in 2002, finally, one of the ex-CTOs of Microsoft, Nathan Myhrvold, comes in, provides private funding, and they finish the printing and stereotyping section of the machine. And so finally, 181 years later, we have the difference engine ready. Well, maybe not for production. There's one, they built another one, so we've got 2 of them out there in the real world. But what I want to say is that when your own projects inevitably go over time and over budget, don't feel too bad because they're not 180 years over budget and you're probably not dead. Okay, so with all of that done, what is the problem here? Why, like Shane said, are we so off that future of PWAs just being right here, right now, being the default for development as we go? And for me, I think it really comes down to this combination. We've got high complexity on the development side. You've got a whole set of different stacks. And with the JavaScript community, you can often rely on a new stack coming out every 6 weeks that you're expected to spin up on and learn. And then you also have low awareness. Because these things are changing so quickly, you're busy writing the code to pay your own rent or mortgage. That means you don't always have the time to be learning the latest new thing that has come out. You often want to wait a bit of time for that to become stable, to actually have proven itself in the market. All of this means that when you're pitching this kind of stuff, it can be difficult to determine the return on investment that you're going to get from this. Okay, so what I want to show you then in this talk is a couple use cases where I feel you can follow this pattern to apply a sprinkling of PWA functionality into your work today. And what we're going to look at is establishing a baseline, defining that metric for success, and then implementing the thing that you want to use to change the metric. And I think it's important to say here as well that when I talk about things like Lighthouse and using that as the single source of truth, like with any metric, the metric is only good for approaching the solution to your problem, right? Don't fetishize getting 100 on Lighthouse. That does not necessarily mean you've built a good website. Much like you've got full code coverage or all your unit tests pass, that doesn't really mean things are working or that you're going to make money from them. Okay, I want to start with offline then. Or rather specifically, I want to put offline on here, and I want you to never say offline to a client or to a user. The entire point about offline is not, hey, I've put my phone in airplane mode and I can still browse the shop. Nobody really does that. The point of this is about robustly surviving poor network connections. This means that the user just wants to browse around for a new pair of shoes. They don't want to have to worry about, am I going in or out of a lift? Have I stepped onto a train? Am I going from Wi-Fi to cell signal? So this is an enterprise architecture diagram. You can tell because there's a cloud on it here. This is a traditional website setup where we go from you as the user to your browser to an internet over here and a website on the other side. The general thing that we do with service workers then is, and this is the usual scenario, you lose your connectivity and you have nothing. So service worker steps in this arena where service worker effectively lets you have like a front-end caching proxy in front of or stored within your browser. So this is what allows us to work through those offline situations. But one of the things I've often found is service worker is a low-level, very powerful API. And often when you give that to developers, they immediately go out and shoot themselves in the foot with it. This means that they say, accidentally cache their entire site and wonder why their new product catalog isn't showing up. So what I want to talk about here is not simply rushing in and blanket applying this everywhere, but thinking about these discrete, non-invasive, and measurable use cases that you can implement to try and prove out the technology. So first thing, I was going to talk about this, but then Shane covered it in the talk. Now, I did a little Twitter poll earlier that was 50-50 when I left it. Would you like to see the offline error page or offline add to cart? So hands up for the error page. Wow. Okay, hands up for add to cart. Right, so you guys want the thing that I wrote in the 2 hours just before this. Okay, let's skip through this. This is never use this many transitions in your slide, especially if you don't intend to. Oh, actually, the one bit I did want to tell you about this because I wanted to talk about the profitable bit. This is what Trivago did. So you can see here, I'm searching for my favorite city to find hotels in there. Was that a cheer? That's good. Good man. Now, if I go offline here, then what happens is they detect that. And if I try and refresh the page, I get this little tilt maze game. Now, if you get bored during my talk, you can go to Trivago and put your phone into airplane mode, and you can play this game to do it. Now, when I saw this the first time, I thought, oh no, this is like a developer has found this little JavaScript maze library that they really must find an excuse to put on the site. So a Friday afternoon hackathon, they put this together. Now, the point of this, though, is it does look like a little fun game, but what's happening here is when the user goes offline, they're being kept in Trivago's branded experience. Trivago is giving them a message saying, we know you're offline, we're going to try and reconnect in 30 seconds. The end result of this, which is hand wave, 67% of those users, when they were in the funnel, when they lost connectivity, 67% of them were coming back once connectivity was re-enabled. So this is a very simple thing to implement. Go look at Shane's talk, because he showed you the way to do this with Workbox, which is the way to do this, because it is production ready, it's maintained, it's compatible. But these are the kind of things you can look at. Establish that baseline of knowing how many of your users are dropping out of the funnel, and then use something like this to insert it into your existing flow to just make sure that, again, you're keeping more of those customers in the funnel on the way to conversion. Okay, special offer, ask me about offline add to basket. Well, those are the bonus slides. We're going to do offline add to basket. Now, these are very rough because I was literally sat there making them earlier, but I'm going to talk you through what we're going on here. Now, when I talk about these offline use cases, caching is the easiest one. Right? You can just cache content, and when you come back to it, it's ready. You don't serve it off the network. What's harder is doing anything that involves a change in the application state, because obviously, if you're not connected, how are you going to sync that with the server? What I'm going to show you here is kind of like an outbox model. Now, when I say like offline add to basket, what you need to think about is, one, put this together in a way where these are fairly safe changes that you're making. Like if I'm clicking add to basket multiple times, really, in this situation, what you want to happen is I'm just saying add one item to the cart. If I press it multiple times, I should still just end up with one item in the cart, okay, not multiple items. A good way to think about this is things like toggles. If it's add to wish list, that's a very good one to do, because if I just say add to wish list, no matter how many times I press that, it's just added to my wish list. So what I'm doing here is we're inside the service worker in the fetch handler, and another good thing to do here is I'm looking at just URLs that end with cart and have the post request. So what you should do is when you're doing something like this, because replaying post requests is getting into dangerous territory. So you want to make sure that the routing you've done is as specific as possible to limit the exposure if anything goes wrong. Then I'm grabbing a cloned version of the request, because JavaScript has this interesting thing where you can't really do anything with the request after it's been accessed once. I'm sending that off. If that works, great. We're just going to let that work. But if I get an error, then what I'm doing here is I'm grabbing the data out of the request, and I've just used the local forage library here because I looked at the IndexedDB code and it was way too much to fit on a slide. So I found that this was a lot simpler. But effectively what I'm doing is I'm pulling the contents of my post request out and I'm just storing it for later use. Then I go back to my page and I have this send pending add to cart function. And what I've done here is I've just added a timestamp for the past 10 minutes, because what I don't want to happen is if a user has said add to cart and then they get reconnected like after their flight 8 hours later, we probably don't want to like randomly add stuff to your basket 8 hours later. But 10 minutes, that's long enough that, you know, maybe the train started going through the Peak District where oddly we can't have any cell towers. But that means like 10 minutes back in, then maybe you get reception back and you can start adding the basket again. Inside of here, all I'm doing is sending a fetch request, so a post request, and I'm taking the details that I saved earlier, and I'm just building that into the same request that my form would have sent and sending it to my backend. So again, you can do this in a very non-invasive way because you don't necessarily have to change any of the front-end code. You can just insert this inside of the service worker, so it's kind of catching the outgoing request, waiting a little bit, and trying to replay it when it comes back online. Speaking of that, I'm listening for the online event, which is part of the Network Connection Information API. You can also do things like we saw with Trivago, just add a little timer or just have a check whenever the user comes back to the page to see if there are any pending messages and send those. Okay. Oh yes, bonus content. Ask me about background sync later. Okay. The other bit that I wanted to cover, how am I doing for time? Yeah, you all look interested, so this is fine, we'll keep going. Add to home screen is one of the first things that people talk about when they talk about progressive web apps, because add to home screen is very easy to implement, right? You populate your manifest, and then you just add a service worker that can respond when you're offline. Chrome will prompt to add that to your home screen. The problem is, this gives you this experience, right? It's Chrome without the Chrome. Okay, you lose all of those user controls. You lose the omnibar, you lose the context menu, you lose the homepage, the add to bookmarks. Now, if you have built a website, then you have probably built it in the assumption that the user will be browsing it in a browser and have access to these controls. You don't want to do add to home screen if you have not already ensured that your site is going to provide an app-like experience. That means that you need buttons for things like, hey, the user's found a product they want to share. You need to give them a button to share that URL rather than just letting them select it from the omnibar, because the omnibar is now hidden. But sort of going back on that then, add to home screen is interesting, but things on your home screen are generally reserved for like daily usage. So like I have Twitter on my home screen. I have Google Plus on my home screen. These are apps that I use every single day. Whereas a lot of e-commerce apps, I might not be, and success does not mean I am a daily active user for these. Like if it's something like a furniture site, I'm not someone who buys a new sofa every single day, right? That's something I try and do as little as possible because IKEA is like my version of hell. So what I don't necessarily want is I don't want your site on my home screen, okay? I don't need a link to your homepage. But what you could give me is if I have ordered a new sofa, you could give me something that is a link to that order. So it's personalized to me, and it's useful for the duration of me waiting for my sofa to be built, shipped, and delivered to me. And this is what we do here. So who's done like add to home screen before? Yeah? Who's awake right now? Yeah? Okay, about 50% of you. Good, good. Okay. Now, what we do over here is we're linking to the manifest, but this is on the order confirmation page. And what I've done here is I've just created a manifest under that particular order. And the manifest I'm generating dynamically. So it'll have a dynamic start URL, it'll have a dynamic image. And then inside of here, now this is actually changing in the next version of Chrome, but there's a kind of a longer term vision for how this will work. Now what normally happens is when you fulfill the criteria for add to home screen, Chrome and some of the other browsers just show you the button, just say like, hey, add to home screen, no matter what portion of the journey that you're in. So if you're partway through the checkout, it might just pop up saying, hey, add to home screen, which can lead to some anxiety because it's like, oh, if I press this button now, am I going to lose my order? So what we do here is we're catching the event, the add to home screen prompt, and we're just storing it so that later on, in response to a button, we can trigger that ourselves, meaning that when the user has made the order, we're going to show a little track order for my home screen button. You can press that, and the browser will then prompt for add to home screen. And we get something like this. You may be able to guess where I was pulling my slides together from, which may have been my I.O. talk. So I didn't have time to make a new screenshot just for this event. I apologize for that. But I also didn't check if the Meet Magento site is a PWA. Is it? No? No, I'm seeing that. Okay, good. I don't feel so bad. But now what I have is I have my order on my home screen. I have something that is personalized to me. And it means when I tap on that, I'm going to the order status. And it means that once the order reaches its end of life as well, you can do things like prompt the user, hey, you know what you could do? You could either look for a matching coffee table, or you can just delete this. So it gives you that ability to have something on the home screen, but it's personalized and it's useful. Okay, since I talked about the process for doing this, I should probably show you where we can measure success for add to home screen as well, so you can work this out. Where I showed you the deferred prompt before, we're going to expand that a little bit. And the deferred prompt does actually return this user choice result, where inside of here, you can actually see whether they've installed or dismissed. And what I'm doing here is I've just put Google Analytics on this. So I'm just firing a Google Analytics event to let me know that the user installed or dismissed the prompt. Now, likewise, inside of our manifest, and this is a snippet of this, what I've done here, there we go, is I've also just added some Google Analytics campaign parameters on the end of my start URL. So again, this is giving me the launches from the home screen that I can track. And something I wanted to highlight, when I talked about not doing add to home screen for your whole site because you haven't optimized it to be an app-like experience, this is what the scope keyword does inside of your manifest. What this means is that whilst this will act like an app, like if someone texts me the link to an order and I follow it, it will open inside of the installed app. But if someone texts me a link to a product that is outside of the order path, then this will just open in the normal website. So again, when I talk about incremental and non-invasive, this means that you can keep your existing website as it is, and you can just work on doing a microsite inside of your domain where you might want to experiment with some of the add to home screen functionality. If you find me later, actually, a couple years ago, Booking.com tried this. They did an interesting experiment with add to home screen for a trip, and they've got a whole talk up and a blog up about this. Okay, so again, that's what I really want to focus on here. Don't go out and just do add to home screen because you can. Do it if you have actually created an app-like experience inside of your site. Okay, the final bit of this then is because I mentioned that the deep links will actually open inside of the app. That means you won't track the launches from the home screen for those, but you probably still want an indication that people are using it as an app or using it as a site. The standalone method, this can actually be matched as a CSS media query. So inside of your page, you can do this. You can check for that standalone, and that tells you whether the app is being used in standalone mode. Okay. Ooh, Yeah, native apps. That is a good one. I'm going to gloss over that for now to really try and entice you to come talk to me about that later. Okay, I want to wrap up then with notifications, because this is an area where push notifications on the web have been getting a bit of a bad rap. I have a personal, I hesitate to say hobby, but every time I see like a tweet go out about nobody wants push notifications on the open web, there's a raft of people agreeing with it going, oh yeah, no, I don't want push notifications on the web. Except for Gmail, that would be useful. Oh, or except for Twitter, that's useful. Oh, or except for like purchases on eBay, that would be useful. So there's always this kind of, people don't want spam, but they do want notifications. So this is very easy to do, but it's a lot of power, so I don't want you to go and abuse it. So I'm going to give you a couple rules as to how you would go about putting this together. First of all, notifications should be personal. They should be relevant to me, to the person receiving the notification. They should be precise and complete as well. Whilst I can tap on a notification to go through to your site, the best kind of notifications are the ones that I can just glance at and then move on. I don't even need to go through to the site. And finally, they should be timely, right? Always remember, I don't want to come back. I get this on Facebook sometimes. I open up a laptop I haven't used for a while, and I get all of my Facebook notifications for like the past month. You can expire notifications so they do not appear on the user's device again. And once you put all of that together, what does it look like? It looks like this. New sofa's arriving in 5 minutes. I've got some actions on there. It's personal to me, it's timely, and I've got all the information I need inside of the notification. I don't necessarily need to go onto the site to use it. Okay, how am I doing?
A few minutes.
A few minutes? Okay, cool. So we can talk about how to measure this then. Inside of notifications, this is what it looks like inside of the service worker where I'm sending the notification. So my server will push out a data packet like this. It's got a title, options. You can see the actions in there for like track or phone that I've added. That gets received by the service worker. The service worker will wake up in response to the push message. And something that sometimes catches people out is push notifications are actually a two-stage process, right? You receive the push message, and then you're responsible for actually displaying a notification on the screen. So that's what I'm doing here, is I'm pulling the data out of the payload, and I'm using the show notification method that, unsurprisingly, shows a notification on the screen. The next part then is when the user clicks on that notification. Again, I find people often think that if you show a notification and you click it, it would take you through to the site that originated it. That's not the case. You click on a notification by default, it does nothing. So we probably want to make it do something. And this, we use the notification click listener here. You can see that I've got a default location there, and I'm testing to see if the user used an action. If they used one of the actions, I'm just adding that as a get parameter so that I can do something. Now, these are your areas for where you should be adding tracking, right? The first bit is you can track notification push message was delivered to the user. The second one, you can track if they actually interacted with the push notification or used one of the actions on there. And the bonus content on here, ask me about what happens when you click the notification when you're offline. Okay, and finally then, I want to finish up with asking for permission in context. The worst thing you can possibly do is ask for notification permission as soon as you hit the site. I've seen a couple news sites doing this, and the horrible thing is that, like with a lot of spam, at the moment, asking for that notification right away gets a higher opt-in rate, and that's because people don't know what they're agreeing to. Now, over time, that is really going to start to sour the ecosystem. You're already seeing browsers like Firefox make it so that you can just turn off notifications across the board. So what I'm really saying here is a little bit of flattery. You are the pioneers of like e-commerce on the web here. We're giving you this power. I'm assuming you're not spammers, so don't go out and ruin this for everyone else, okay? I want you to create useful, personal, timely notifications. Okay, your homework then is to go through a few of these steps. I want you to go and review the PWA checklist. I want you to select one of the items off of there and identify a use case in your site. Identify the metric for success that you're going to use to determine whether that's a useful feature to add. Establish that baseline of how your performance is at the moment. Then I want you to implement and then I want you to track me down on Twitter, on email, get my phone number somehow, tell me about what you've done, because part of my job is actually working out whether this was an easy process for you, whether this really was beneficial. If it was, let's do a case study. If it wasn't, let's change the platform so it is actually useful for you. So with that, thank you very much. I don't think we have time for a question.
That's one.
We can have one question. Or we can have no questions. Oh, we can have one question. And then
This is dangerous.
do find me afterwards.
This isn't a real question.
Oh, it's more of a comment.
No, I actually, I do have a question,
Yes.
which is that it's specifically with the, we were talking about this earlier, and I love the demonstration of an ephemeral home screen app, and the talking about the UX changes that could happen to notifications to make them more customizable and unobtrusive and stuff. But I wanted to know, the generation of the manifest JSON implies a backend that is provisioned to do that.
Yes.
Which is not like a standard API. So it makes it a little bit less cross-platform. I was wondering if, could you put a data URL in the href of a manifest link?
I will double check that. I have a feeling that you might be able to. There are some crazy things you can do with manifests. I found that you can actually send cookies to access the manifest as
Yeah,
well. Don't do that. Don't send cookies with the manifest.
I won't, sir.
But my assumption here is
Yeah.
that you should treat the manifest just like any other template.
Yeah.
Right? Just like the order status that you're
Yeah.
generating server-side, generate the JSON server-side as well. Whereas before it would have just been in your static assets. You're just generating it.
Right, so that implies, you know.
I'm pretty sure I remember someone trying this out, and I can't remember if it worked or not, but we can explore that.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, it's easy to implement the endpoint, but I'm just thinking about portability of all this stuff, yeah. The other question is that, so the subliminal message in the Lighthouse, I was clear, but what's the message of the one cloud that is in front of the Lighthouse and like 10 feet from the ground?
I guess, it could be the low-hanging fruit, because, right, if you look at Lighthouse, one thing I really wanted to say out of Shane's talk is all of this stuff is amazing, but probably the biggest benefit you can get right now is fixing your images and fixing the amount of JavaScript you're loading. If you haven't done those things, don't bother with all of the stuff I just told you. Go and fix that first before you come back to this. So with that, thank you, and I'm around for the rest of the day.